On Christmas Eve, my mother locked the door on my son and me like we were strangers. Then my grandmother called with a chilling truth. "You think that house is hers? You are wrong." I turned my car around, not to beg for a bed, but to take back the deed. When the screen at their party lit up, the family finally understood. That night was not a holiday celebration. It was a trial. My name is Avery Flores. If you looked at me on the night of December 24th, you would have seen a woman who looked like she was barely holding the edges of her life together. I was 34 years old, wearing wrinkled navy blue medical scrubs that smelled faintly of antiseptic and stale coffee, driving a sedan that had over 200,000 miles on the odometer and a heater that only worked when the car was moving faster than 40 miles per hour. Beside me in the passenger seat sat my son, Milo. He was 8 years old, his small body bundled into a puffy winter coat that we had bought secondhand 3 months ago. On his lap, he balanced a shoebox wrapped clumsily in bright red paper, his fingers drumming a nervous rhythm against the lid. We were in the affluent suburbs of Charlotte, North Carolina, a place where the driveways were paved with crushed stone and the mailboxes were made of brick. The houses here did not just have Christmas lights. They had professional lighting displays that probably cost more than my entire car. We were heading to my mother's house, or rather, the house my grandmother, June, had built and invited us to, but which my mother, Gloria, ruled like a feudal lord. My hands gripped the steering wheel tight enough to turn my knuckles white. I was exhausted. I had just come off a double shift, and every muscle in my back felt like it was pulled tight as a guitar string. But I forced a smile for Milo. "Look at that one," I said, pointing to a house draped in cascading white icicle lights. Milo looked, his eyes wide. "It is bright. Mom, do you think Grandma June is waiting for us?" "She is always waiting for you." "Buddy," I said. I pulled the car up the long, winding driveway of the Caldwell estate. The house loomed ahead, a massive structure of brick and white pillars, glowing warm and golden against the biting cold of the winter night. It looked like a postcard. It looked like the American dream. It looked like a place where a family gathered to drink cocoa and laugh. I parked the car off to the side, mindful of the oil leak my mechanic had warned me about last week. There were 3 other cars in the circular drive. One was my brother Bryce's flashy sports car, a sleek silver beast that screamed new money. The other 2 were luxury SUVs I did not recognize, shining under the porch lights. "Okay, let's go," I said. Milo scrambled out, clutching his red box. I grabbed my tote bag and locked the car manually, because the fob had died 6 months ago. The wind was sharp, cutting through my thin scrub top, but I marched up the steps, holding Milo's hand. We reached the massive oak double doors with the brass knocker shaped like a lion's head. I took a breath. I always needed a breath before facing Gloria. I knocked. I could hear music inside. Jazz, soft, expensive, tasteful jazz. I heard laughter. Then the latch clicked. The door did not swing wide open. It cracked open just enough for a body to block the entrance. My mother, Gloria Caldwell, stood in the gap. She was wearing a floor-length emerald green gown that shimmered under the porch light. Her hair was stiff with hairspray, every blonde strand beaten into submission. She held a crystal wine glass in one hand, her manicured fingers wrapped around the stem like claws. She looked at me. Her eyes did not travel up to meet mine immediately. First, they swept down to my scuffed sneakers. Then they crawled up my legs, lingering on the shapeless scrubs, and finally reached my face. It was not a look of greeting. It was the look one gives a stain on a silk tablecloth. Then she looked at Milo. Her expression did not soften. It tightened. "Avery," she said. Her voice was ice. "What are you doing here?" I blinked, the cold wind stinging my eyes. "It is Christmas Eve. Mom, we are here for dinner. Grandma June called us last week." Gloria did not move. She did not step aside. She stayed planted in the doorway, an impeccably dressed gargoyle guarding the gates of heaven. "You cannot come in," she said. I felt a laugh bubble up in my throat, a hysterical sound. What, we are full, Avery, full, I repeated. Mom, this house has 6 bedrooms. It is 8,000 square feet. What do you mean? Full. Gloria took a sip of her wine, her eyes darting over my shoulder to make sure no neighbors were watching this sordid little scene. Bryce is entertaining, she said, her voice lowered to a harsh whisper. The Harts are here, Elliot and his wife, and their daughter Madeline. You know, the people investing in Bryce's firm, the people whose daughter he's going to marry. I felt Milo squeeze my hand. I squeezed back. Okay, I said slowly. So the Harts are here. We do not need a guest room. Milo can sleep on the pullout in the den, and I can take the couch in the sunroom. We just want to see Grandma and eat dinner. No, Gloria said. The word hung in the frozen air. The Harts are staying in the guest suite, she continued, ticking items off on her fingers as if explaining basic math to a toddler. And the den, we are using that for coat storage. Coat storage, I echoed. Yes, the Harts brought a lot of formal wear for the gala tomorrow, and Madeline has 3 changes of clothes. We needed a dedicated space for the garments so they do not wrinkle. I stared at her. My brain refused to process the logic. You are using a bedroom for coats. You are telling me that my son cannot sleep in his grandmother's house on Christmas Eve because you need a room for dresses. It is about presentation. Avery, Gloria snapped, her patience fraying. Bryce is closing a massive deal. This dinner is crucial. We need everything to be perfect. We cannot have, she waved her hand vaguely in my direction, gesturing at my scrubs, at my tired face, at my old car in the driveway. Complications. You look like you just crawled out of a dumpster. It is embarrassing. I am a nurse. Mom, I said, my voice trembling with a mix of rage and humiliation. I save lives. I came straight from the hospital. You look poor, she corrected, and poverty is catchy. I do not want the Harts to see you. Milo stepped forward then. He was shivering, his nose turning pink in the cold. He held up the shoebox. Hi, Grandma Gloria, he said, his voice small. I made a present for Great-Grandma June. Can I give it to her? Gloria looked down at the box. It was decorated with macaroni shells painted gold and glitter that was already flaking off onto the porch tiles. She did not touch it. She recoiled slightly, as if the box contained a dead rat. June is resting. Gloria lied. I knew she was lying. Grandma June never rested on Christmas Eve. She lived for the party. She is not to be disturbed. And frankly, Milo, we do not need more clutter in the house. She reached into the hidden pocket of her gown. I watched, paralyzed, as she pulled out a $50 bill. It was crisp, fresh from the bank. She thrust it toward Milo. Here, she said. Milo did not take it. He looked at the green paper, then up at his grandmother's face, confused. Take it, Gloria commanded, grabbing his small, cold hand and jamming the bill into his palm. Go find a diner, or a drive-thru. Get yourself some burgers. Just go somewhere else. Mom, please, I whispered. It is Christmas. And Bryce is my son, too, she hissed, her mask of civility slipping to reveal the snarl beneath. He is actually making something of himself. He is bringing honor to this family. You are a reminder of everything we try to forget. Now go. Before you ruin everything. She stepped back. The heavy oak door began to close. Through the narrowing gap, I saw the warm glow of the chandelier in the foyer. I saw a waiter walking past with a tray of champagne flutes. I saw the massive Christmas tree, towering and perfect. Then the door slammed shut. The sound of the lock turning was loud, like a gunshot in the silence of the night. Click, the deadbolt slid home. I stood there on the welcome mat, staring at the wood grain. I could feel the heat radiating from the house, leaking through the cracks. But none of it was for us. We were on the outside. Milo let out a sound, a small, broken hiccup. I looked down. He was crying, big, silent tears rolling down his cheeks. He looked at the $50 bill crumpled in his hand. Then he looked at the door. Mom, he asked, his voice shaking. Yeah, buddy, I choked out. Why does she hate us? The question hit me harder than the cold wind. It felt like a physical blow to the chest. I dropped to my knees right there on the porch, ignoring the way the stone bit into my legs, so I could look him in the eye. I pulled the collar of his coat up to cover his neck. She does not hate us. Milo, I lied. I wiped a tear from his cheek with my thumb. She is confused. She thinks things are important. Things like dresses and cars and big houses. She has forgotten that people are what matter. He sniffled, looking at the money. She said to go eat burgers. I took the $50 bill from his hand. I smoothed it out against my leg. The face of Ulysses S. Grant stared up at me. It felt dirty. It felt like hush money. It felt like she had just tried to buy my son's dignity for the price of a tank of gas. A fire ignited in my stomach. It started small, just a spark of indignation, but it spread fast, burning away the exhaustion, burning away the sadness. I looked at the money, and then I looked at the closed door. Keep it, I said, my voice hardening. Milo looked at me. To buy food. No, I said. I folded the bill neatly and tucked it into the pocket of his coat. We are not spending this. We are going to keep it. We are going to frame it. Frame it, he asked. Someday, I said, standing up and taking his hand, pulling him away from the door that had just been slammed in our faces. Someday, we are going to look at that $50 and remember exactly what it cost her. I walked us back to the car. My legs felt heavy, but my spine was straight. Gloria thought she had won. She thought she had discarded the trash so her precious Bryce could shine for his investors. She thought I was just Avery the failure, Avery the single mom, Avery who scraped by on nurses' wages and lived in a rental apartment on the wrong side of town. She had no idea. She saw the scrubs in the old car and assumed that was the sum total of my existence. She did not know about the nights I spent studying forensic accounting. She did not know about the small medical supply distribution business I had started 3 years ago, a business that was currently operating out of a leased warehouse in Raleigh and had just secured a contract with 3 major urgent care chains. She did not know that the profits from that business were not being spent on clothes or cars, but were sitting in a high-yield trust, compounding, growing, waiting. I had been living like a pauper to build an empire for Milo, to make sure he never had to beg anyone for anything. I had been playing the long game, and tonight, Gloria had just made a fatal error in her own game. I opened the car door for Milo and buckled him in. He was still clutching his shoebox gift. Do not worry about the present. Milo, I said, shutting his door. Grandma June will get it. I promise. I walked around to the driver's side before I got in. I looked back at the house one last time. From the dark driveway, the Caldwell estate looked like a stage set. The windows were bright squares of yellow light. Framing the actors inside, I could see silhouettes moving. They were toasting. They were laughing. They were celebrating their wealth and their connections. They thought they had erased us. They thought they could lock the door and we would just disappear into the night. Grateful for the $50, obedient and invisible. I got into the car and slammed the door. The engine coughed and sputtered before roaring to life. I turned on the headlights, cutting 2 beams of yellow into the darkness. I put the car in reverse. As the gravel crunched under my tires, I did not feel like crying anymore. The sadness was gone, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. Gloria had locked the door on a stranger, but she was about to find out that she had trapped herself inside with a monster of her own making, and the next time I walked up those steps, I would not be knocking. I shifted gears and drove away, leaving the warmth of the house behind, driving straight into the cold, dark heart of the night. But as I merged onto the main road, my hands steady on the wheel, I knew one thing for certain: the night was far from all over. The interstate was a ribbon of gray concrete stretching out into the darkness, illuminated only by the rhythmic sweeping of headlights from the oncoming traffic. I was driving on autopilot, my mind a chaotic storm of humiliation and rage. Beside me, Milo had fallen into a restless silence, his head resting against the cold window, the $50 bill still balled up in his small fist inside his coat pocket. The heater in the sedan rattled, blowing lukewarm air that smelled of dust and old plastic, struggling to fight off the chill that had settled deep in my bones. I had been driving for maybe 15 minutes, heading nowhere in particular, just away. Away from the lights, away from the laughter, away from the mother who had looked at me as if I were a disease she needed to scrub from her porch. I was calculating how much gas was left in the tank and wondering which 24-hour diner would let us sit in a booth for 3 hours without ordering more than a side of fries. Then, my phone buzzed against the center console. The sudden vibration made me jump, my hands jerking slightly on the steering wheel. I glanced down. The screen lit up the dark cabin with a harsh white glow. Grandma June. My stomach dropped. For a split second, I considered not answering. A wave of nausea rolled over me. I could picture it perfectly, Gloria holding the phone, standing in the foyer with a glass of wine, calling to berate me for not leaving fast enough, or perhaps to verify that I had not parked down the street to embarrass them. My mother often used my grandmother's phone when hers was charging, or simply because she felt entitled to control every line of communication in that house. I did not want to hear Gloria's voice again. I did not think I could handle another syllable of her poison without swerving into the median. But the phone kept buzzing. It was insistent, if it was actually Grandma June, and I ignored it. She would worry. She was 82 years old. She had been frail lately, or so Gloria kept telling me. I let out a shaky breath and tapped the speaker icon. "Hello," I said, my voice sounding thin and brittle even to my own ears. "Avery." It was not Gloria. The voice was raspy, aged like oak, but it lacked the slurry, condescending drawl of my mother. It was sharp, clear. It was June. "Where in God's name are you?" she demanded. Her tone was not frail. It was the tone of a woman who had raised 4 children during a recession and buried a husband without shedding a tear in public. "I have been sitting in this wingback chair for 60 minutes waiting for my great-grandson. The roast is getting cold, and the ice in my tea has melted." I felt a lump form in my throat, hot and painful. I gripped the steering wheel harder. "Grandma," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We are not coming." "What do you mean you are not coming?" June snapped. She sounded closer now, as if she had pressed the phone tight against her ear. "Gloria just came in here and told me you called. She said you picked up an emergency shift at the hospital. She said you were too busy chasing overtime to spend Christmas Eve with your family." The air left my lungs. "She said what I whispered. She said you are working," June repeated, her voice dropping an octave, losing its annoyance and gaining a sudden, laser-focused intensity. "Avery, are you working?" I looked at Milo. He was watching me now, his eyes wide in the passing shadows of the streetlights. He knew exactly what was happening. I could not breathe. The lie was so effortless for Gloria. It was so clean. It painted her as the victim of a workaholic daughter, the martyr who just wanted her family together but was let down by her ungrateful child. It erased the cruelty of the last hour and replaced it with a narrative that made her look like a saint. I hit the blinker and swerved the car onto the breakdown lane. The tires crunched violently over the gravel and debris, pebbles pinging against the undercarriage like hail. I slammed the gear shift into park and squeezed my eyes shut, fighting the tears that were threatening to spill over again. "No, Grandma," I choked out. "I am not working." "Then where are you?" June asked. The background noise on her end fell silent. I could imagine her waving a hand to silence the room, or perhaps staring down anyone who dared to speak. "I am on the side of the highway," I said, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "We were there. We were at the front door 10 minutes ago, and June's voice was a single, sharp syllable, and Mom would not let us in." The silence that followed was heavier than the humid summer air of the South. It stretched out, filled only by the rushing sound of cars speeding past my window, shaking the frame of my old sedan. She locked the door. "Grandma," I continued, my voice breaking. She stood there in her green dress and told me there was no room. She said the house was full because of Bryce's investors. She said they were using the spare rooms for Coates. Coates, Grandma. She chose Coates over Milo. I heard a sound on the other end of the line. It was a sharp intake of breath, followed by the clinking of jewelry, as if June had shifted abruptly in her chair. "She sent us away?" June asked. Her voice was terrifyingly quiet. "Yes. She told us to go find a burger joint. She said I looked like a failure." I took a shuddering breath. She said I looked like a failure, that I would embarrass Bryce in front of the Harts. I looked over at Milo again. He was tracing the pattern on the shoebox lid, trying to make himself small. "Did she give him money?" June asked. The question was so specific, so cutting, that it startled me. "What did your mother try to pay you off?" June clarified, her voice hardening into something that sounded like iron cooling. "Did she shove cash at my great-grandson to make him go away?" I looked at Milo's pocket. The corner of the $50 bill was sticking out. "Yes," I whispered. $50. Silence again. This time, it lasted longer. I could hear the faint sound of jazz music in the background on her end, the same music I had heard through the crack in the door. It sounded like a mockery now. I wiped my face with the back of my hand. "I am sorry. Grandma, we just did not want to cause a scene. We are going to go home. We will come see you next week when turn the car around." The command was low and guttural. It was not a request. What I asked. "Turn the car around." "Avery. Right now." "Grandma. I cannot." I pleaded. Gloria was clear. Bryce has important people there. If I go back, it is just going to be a screaming match. I do not want Milo to see that. I do not want to ruin your Christmas. "You are not ruining anything," June said. Her voice was rising now, trembling not with age, but with a fury I had never heard directed at me. "You listen to me. Avery Flores. You turn that car around and you drive back here. You park that rusted piece of metal right in front of the portico, not in the street, not in the garage. Right in front of the front steps. But Bryce's car is there," I said, "and the Hart's SUVs. If Bryce's car is in the way, you lay on your horn until he moves it," June ordered. "If he does not move it, you drive over the lawn. I do not care if you crush the hydrangeas. You get Milo to that front door." "Grandma, please," I said, looking at the rearview mirror, seeing the red taillights of the cars leaving me behind. "They kicked us out. It is their house. I cannot just force my way in." And that was when she said it, the sentence that stopped my heart and froze the blood in my veins. She let out a dry, bitter laugh that sounded like dry leaves scraping together. "Their house," she repeated. "You think that house belongs to your mother? You think it belongs to Bryce?" I frowned. "Well, yes. Dad and Mom have lived there for 20 years. You moved into the in-law suite 5 years ago." "You are wrong," June said, and the softness was completely gone from her voice. She took a breath, and when she spoke again, every word was enunciated with the precision of a judge delivering a death sentence. "Your grandfather and I built that house in 1972. When he passed, the deed transferred to me. I let Gloria and Richard live there to raise you kids. I let them play Lord and Lady of the Manor because I did not care about the title, but make no mistake, Avery," I held my breath. "My name is on the deed," she hissed. "Not hers, not Richard's, and certainly not that peacock brother of yours. That stands for the land. The bricks, the roof, and every piece of furniture inside it, it is my house, and I decide who crosses that threshold." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. For my entire life, that house had been Gloria's fortress, her rules, her taste, her domain. I had always walked on eggshells there because I felt like a guest in her kingdom. The idea that she was merely a tenant, a guest herself, was a paradigm shift so violent it made me dizzy. "Are you telling me I started—" my voice trailing off. "I am telling you that the lock on that door is mine," June said, "and tonight I am unlocking it. Now turn around." The line went dead. I sat there for a moment, listening to the hum of the engine. The phone screen went black. Mom Milo asked softly, "Are we in trouble?" I looked at him. The fear in his eyes broke my heart. But then, something else surged in to replace the heartbreak. It was a feeling I had not felt in years. It was not just anger. It was adrenaline. It was the cold, electric buzz of power. "No, buddy," I said. I tossed the phone onto the passenger seat. We are not in trouble. I reached out and shifted the car into drive. I checked the mirror. A gap in the traffic opened up. We were not going home to eat microwave dinners. We were not going to frame that $50 bill as a monument to our shame. I cranked the steering wheel hard to the left. The sedan groaned as I pulled a U-turn across the gravel median, the headlights sweeping across the dried grass and trash before biting into the pavement of the northbound lane. The engine roared as I slammed my foot down on the accelerator. The speedometer climbed. 40, 50, 60. My mother had lied to make me look weak. She had used my grandmother's name to dismiss me. She had treated my son like a beggar, but she had made a miscalculation. She had forgotten who actually held the keys to the kingdom. I am going to need you to be brave. Milo, I said, my eyes fixed on the road ahead. The house was only 5 miles back, but those 5 miles felt different now. I wasn't driving a beat-up sedan anymore. I was driving a battering ram. Why, Milo asked, clutching his box. Because we are going back, I said, the lights of the suburbs appearing on the horizon like a cluster of stars. And this time, we are not asking for permission. I drove faster. The wind howled against the windows. But inside, the air was still and heavy with anticipation. I could feel the change in the atmosphere. The night had started with a rejection, a door slamming in my face, but as I saw the exit sign for the Caldwell estate approaching, I knew that the ending of this story had just been rewritten. I was coming back, and I was bringing the owner of the house with me. In spirit, if not in body, Gloria wanted a show for the hearts. She wanted everything to be perfect. Fine, I would give her a show. I took the exit ramp without slowing down, the tires squealing in protest. The darkness of the road seemed to part before me. I was not Avery the disappointment anymore. I was the executioner, and the trial was about to begin. I pulled the sedan right up to the bumper of Bryce's silver sports car, the headlights of my vehicle washing over his pristine waxed paint job. I did not hesitate. I slammed the heel of my hand onto the center of the steering wheel and held it there. The horn was not a polite beep. It was a long, blaring, discordant wail that cut through the silent, frosty air of the neighborhood like a siren. I held it for 5 seconds, then 10. Inside the house, I imagined the crystal glasses vibrating on the table. I imagined the polite conversation about golf handicaps and market shares shattering under the weight of my noise. Milo looked at me, his eyes wide, but he did not look scared anymore. He looked fascinated. The front door flew open. Bryce marched out first. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than my annual rent, a charcoal gray 3-piece that was tailored to within an inch of its life. He looked every bit the successful developer he claimed to be. Until you looked at his face. His face was twisted in a mixture of confusion and annoyance. He stomped down the porch steps, waving his hands as if he could physically shoo the noise away. I let off the horn, the sudden silence ringing in my ears. "Are you insane?" Bryce shouted, his voice cracking slightly. He looked back at the open door, terrified that his guests might be peering out. "You are making a scene. Avery, get that piece of junk out of here. You are blocking the driveway." I rolled down the window. The cold air rushed in, but my blood was running hot. "Move your car." "Bryce," I said. My voice was calm, terrifyingly so. He laughed, a sharp, incredulous bark. "Move my car." "For you go home, Avery. You are drunk or you are off your meds. Serious people are talking inside." Just then, Gloria came rushing out behind him. She was moving so fast in her heels, she nearly tripped on the welcome mat. She looked frantic, her eyes darting between my car and the windows of the house. "Avery, stop this," she hissed, rushing to the driver's side window. She tried to block me from view with her own body, spreading her arms like she was trying to hide an elephant. "Park down the street. Park in the neighbor's driveway. Just get away from the front door. The Harts are wondering what the noise is. I am not parking down the street." "Mom," I said, looking her dead in the eye, "I am parking right here." "You cannot," she shrieked, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Look at this car. It is leaking oil on the pavers. It is hideous. Then, the tapping started. It was a slow, rhythmic sound coming from the doorway. Click, click, click. The three of us froze. Bryce stopped his posturing. Gloria stopped her frantic waving. We all looked up at the porch. Grandma June was there. She was not in her wheelchair tonight, though she often used it when her hips bothered her. Tonight, she was standing, leaning heavily on her mahogany cane with the silver handle. She was not dressed for a gala. She was wearing a simple, thick wool cardigan over a floral blouse and loose slacks. Her gray hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and her face was scrubbed clean of any makeup, in a sea of sequins and silk. She looked stark. She looked real. And she looked formidable. "Grandma?" Bryce started, putting on his best charming grandson smile, though it faltered at the edges. "Avery is just leaving. She got confused about the time. I was just helping her back out." June did not look at Bryce. She did not look at Gloria. Her eyes locked onto mine through the windshield, and for a second, I saw a flicker of pride. Then she shifted her gaze to Bryce. "Move the car," she said. Her voice was not loud. It was low, raspy, and carried the weight of absolute authority. Bryce blinked. "Grandma, the Harts are inside. I cannot just go in there and tell them I need to move my car because my sister decided to crash the party. It looks unprofessional." June took one step forward. The cane hit the stone porch with a heavy thud. "You will move that car, Bryce, or I will call a tow truck to drag it out into the street. And I will do it while sitting at the head of the dining table explaining to Elliot Hart exactly why his future son-in-law does not understand the concept of property rights." Bryce went pale. The threat was specific enough to be real. He looked at Gloria for help, but she was staring at her mother with her mouth slightly open, stunned into silence. "Fine," Bryce spat. He fished his keys out of his pocket and stormed toward his silver sports car. "Unbelievable. This is unbelievable." June turned her gaze to Gloria. "And you?" she said. Gloria flinched. "Mom, I was just trying to keep the evening flowing smoothly." "Fix the blue room," June commanded. "The blue room." Gloria gasped. "But Mom, that is where I put Madeline's fur coats and her changing bag. It has the best view of the lake." "I do not care if the Pope's hat is in there," June said. "Move the coats to the hallway closet. Change the sheets. My great-grandson is sleeping in the blue room tonight, and if I find one speck of dust or one misplaced hanger, you will be sleeping in the garage." Gloria looked like she had been slapped, but she didn't argue. She knew that tone. She spun on her heel and ran back inside, presumably to frantically relocate mink coats. Bryce peeled out of the spot, his tires spinning aggressively as he parked on the grass, the very thing he had accused me of potentially doing. I pulled my battered sedan into the prime spot, right in the center of the circular drive, illuminated by the golden floodlights. "Come on, Milo," I said. We walked up the steps. As I passed June, she did not hug me, she did not smile, she just nodded. Once, "Chin up," she whispered. "The wolves are inside. Do not let them see you bleed." We entered the house. The warmth hit me first, smelling of roasting rosemary, expensive cologne, and old money. The dining room was visible from the foyer. The table was set with the good china the Royal Doulton set that I was forbidden from touching as a child. Crystal goblets sparkled under the chandelier. Sitting at the table were the Harts. Elliot Hart was a man who looked like he was carved out of granite, with silver hair and a suit that cost more than my car. His wife was dripping in diamonds, and there was Madeline Maddie Bryce's fiancée. She was beautiful in a sharp, angular way, wearing a red dress that looked like a weapon. My father, Richard, sat at the end of the table. He looked small. When we walked in, he looked up, and for a second, I saw relief in his eyes, followed immediately by fear as he glanced at the empty doorway where Gloria would usually be. "I see we have more guests," Elliot Hart said, his voice booming and jovial, though his eyes were calculating. Bryce rushed in behind us, straightening his tie, sweating slightly. "Yes, Elliot. So sorry. This is my sister, Avery." "And her son, Milo." There was a scheduling conflict. Avery, Madeline said. She did not stand up. Her eyes swept over my scrubs. Oh, you came straight from work. How dedicated. I work in the emergency room, I said. Keeping my voice even, I did not have time to change. I pulled out a chair for Milo next to Grandma June's empty spot. Gloria came bustling back in, breathless, smoothing her dress. Everything is sorted, she announced. Her voice too high, too bright. Just a little mix-up. Please, everyone, sit. Let's not let the tenderloin get cold. The dinner began. It was a masterclass in tension. Bryce launched immediately into his pitch. He was desperate to regain control of the room, to make everyone forget the rusted car in the driveway and the woman in scrubs at the table. The Legacy Plaza project is not just a mall. Elliot, Bryce said, gesturing with his fork, it is a mixed-use ecosystem. We are talking high-end retail on the ground floor, luxury condos above, and a rooftop green space that will redefine the skyline of Charlotte. We have already secured verbal agreements from 3 anchor tenants. Elliot nodded, swirling his wine. And the zoning, I heard the city council was pushing back on the height restrictions. Bryce waved a hand dismissively. Taken care of. I have a meeting with Councilman Miller next week. He understands the economic impact. We are looking at a 40% return on investment within the first 3 years. Conservative estimate. Gloria leaned forward, her eyes shining with adoration. Bryce has always had a vision. She gushed. Even as a boy. He was building things. He is a genius with numbers. Truly, we are just so proud to have him leading the family into the next generation. She looked at my father. Aren't we? Richard, Dad cleared his throat, staring at his potatoes. Yes, very proud. I focused on cutting Milo's meat. I could feel the bile rising in my throat. Bryce was not a genius. He was a gambler who used other people's money. I knew for a fact he had failed his real estate licensing exam twice before passing. Then Maddie turned her gaze on me. She had been watching me eat, her nose slightly wrinkled, as if she smelled something rotting. So, Avery, she said, her voice dripping with faux concern, you work in the ER. That must be so intense. It is, I said, the germs, she continued, leaning back slightly as if I were contagious. Do you worry about bringing things home, Sitting here at the table? Are you sure it is sanitary? I read that bacteria can live on fabric for days. The table went quiet. It was a direct insult, wrapped in a hygiene question. She was calling me dirty. She was saying I polluted their pristine world. I saw Gloria tense up, but she did not defend me. She looked at me with a pleading expression, begging me not to snap, not to ruin the deal. I gripped my fork so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to tell her that the blood on my scrubs was cleaner than the money her father used to buy her jewelry. I wanted to tell her that I saved a teenager from an overdose 4 hours ago while she was probably getting a pedicure. I opened my mouth to speak. Then I felt a hand on my wrist. It was Grandma June. She did not look at me. She was looking at Maddie. Her expression mild, almost bored, but her grip on my wrist was iron. 1 tap, 2 taps, not yet. The message was clear. We do not fight skirmishes. We fight the war. I swallowed the anger. It burned going down, hot and bitter. We have strict decontamination protocols, I said quietly, and I washed my hands. Twice. Maddie smirked, satisfied that I had backed down. Well, one can never be too careful, especially with children around. I would hate for Milo to pick up something nasty. Bryce laughed. A nervous, braying sound. Maddie is a bit of a germaphobe. But she is right. Hygiene is key. Just like in business. Right, Elliot? Keep the assets clean. They went back to talking about square footage and tax abatements. They talked about the Caldwell legacy as if I were not sitting there. As if I were invisible. I needed air. The suffocation was physical now. Excuse me, I said, standing up. I need some water. Gloria glared at me. There is water in your glass. Avery, I need ice. I said. I walked out of the dining room, my heart pounding against my ribs. I walked down the hallway, past the portraits of ancestors who would have probably despised Bryce's flashy arrogance. I pushed through the swing door into the kitchen. It was empty. The catering staff must have been in the pantry or serving in the other room. It was quiet here, the stainless steel appliances humming softly. I leaned against the granite island, taking a deep breath. I just needed a minute, just 60 seconds to compose myself before I went back into the shark tank. Then, I heard a voice. It was coming from the patio doors. The kitchen opened out onto a stone terrace, and the heavy glass sliding door was cracked open just an inch, probably to let the heat out from the ovens. The voice was Bryce's. But it was not the booming, a confident voice he had been using at the dinner table. It was high-pitched. It was fast. It was the voice of a man who was watching a train coming at him and could not untie himself from the tracks. "Please, listen to me," Bryce was saying. "I just need 2 more weeks. Just 2. I froze. I moved closer to the crack in the door, holding my breath. A pause. Someone was speaking on the other end of the line. "I know what I said," Bryce hissed, "but the old bat is still kicking. I cannot liquidate until I have the power of attorney. I am working on it. Tonight was supposed to be the night I got her to sign the competency waiver, but my sister showed up and complicated things." I pressed my hand over my mouth. "Yes, she is losing it." Bryce continued. "Mom has been switching her meds for a month. She is confused half the time. I will get her declared incompetent by Monday. We put her in the facility, the cheap one in Durham. Nobody will check, and then I can sell the house." He paced past the glass, his silhouette jagged in the moonlight. "The house is worth $3 million. Easy," he whispered. "That covers the loan shark and the gambling debt, with enough left over to buy into Elliot's project. But you have to hold off the guys. If they break my legs, I cannot sign the papers." My blood ran cold. This was not just about being mean. This was not just about favoritism. My brother was planning to institutionalize our grandmother. My mother was poisoning her own mother with swapped medication, and they were going to sell the family estate to pay off gambling debts, all while pretending to be tycoons. I stood there in the dark kitchen, the hum of the refrigerator sounding like a roar in my ears. I felt a strange sensation wash over me. The anger was gone. The fear was gone. I reached into my scrub pocket and pulled out my phone. My thumb hovered over the record button. I had come here tonight to get a meal and make a point. But as I listened to Bryce beg for his life while trading away Grandma June's existence, I realized the stakes had changed. I was not just fighting for respect anymore. I was hunting. The silence of the kitchen was a deception. It felt safe, insulated by the hum of the Sub-Zero refrigerator and the heavy granite countertops. But just beyond the glass, the truth was bleeding out into the night. My thumb was already hovering over the record app on my phone, a reflex born from years of documenting patient interactions where liability was a concern. I pressed the red button. The timer started ticking. 1 second, 2 seconds. I pressed my ear closer to the gap in the sliding glass door. The cold air sliced across my cheek, sharp and biting, but I barely felt it. My entire world had narrowed down to the voice on the patio. "I am telling you, it is a done deal," Bryce hissed. His voice was trembling. Stripping away the confident baritone he used in the dining room, he sounded like a cornered animal. "Do not send anyone to the house. If Elliot sees a guy with a neck tattoo knocking on the door, the whole merger collapses." There was a pause as the person on the other end spoke. I could not hear them, but I could hear the desperate, ragged breathing of my brother. 48 hours. Bryce pleaded. "I need 48 hours. The paperwork is drawn up. I just need the signature." He began to pace. I could see his shadow stretching long and distorted across the patio stones, illuminated by the security floodlights. He ran a hand through his hair, destroying the perfect gel style he had spent an hour perfecting. "The old woman is practically a vegetable," he said. I stiffened. Grandma June was the sharpest person I knew. "She had a bad episode yesterday," Bryce continued, his voice dropping lower. "Conspiratorial and nasty. Mom doubled the dosage on her evening meds. She was wandering around the hallway at 3 a.m. looking for her dead husband. It is working. We have the documentation of cognitive decline." My hand flew to my mouth to stifle a gasp. The air in my lungs turned to ice. It was not just age. It was not just dementia. They were drugging her, my mother. The woman who claimed to be a pillar of the community was systematically overdosing her own mother to induce symptoms of senility. I watched the recording timer on my screen, 1 minute and 14 seconds, and what about the sister the voice on the phone must have asked, because Bryce let out a short, cruel laugh. Avery. She is a nobody. She is a nurse. That is actually the beauty of it. I am going to guilt trip her. Tell her grandma needs professional care that we cannot provide at home. I will get her to sign the affidavit as a medical witness. She will put her own license on the line to certify that June is incompetent, and she will not even know she is digging the grave. He stopped pacing and leaned against the brick wall of the house, looking up at the dark sky. Once Avery signs off on the medical necessity, I get guardianship. I put June in that state facility in Durham, the one that takes Medicaid pending assets. Then I liquidate the estate. The land alone is worth enough to cover what I owe you plus the buy-in for the heart deal. Just call off your dogs. I stared at the phone in my hand. The waveform of his voice spiked and dipped in red lines. This was not family drama. This was a felony. This was elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy. Bryce was not building a legacy. He was drowning in gambling debt, and he was using my grandmother's life as a life raft. And he planned to use me, my credentials, my trust, my love for Grandma as the final nail in her coffin. I stopped the recording. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, hard rage that felt like steel settling in my spine. I looked at the file. New recording 4. I did not just leave it there. I knew how technology worked, and I knew how easily phones could be lost, broken, or confiscated. I immediately opened my secure cloud storage app. I uploaded the file to a folder I had encrypted years ago for my business tax returns. Then, for good measure, I emailed a copy to a Proton Mail account I used for anonymous whistleblowing at the hospital. I waited until the progress bar hit 100%. Upload complete. The evidence was safe. It was out of this house. Even if they stripped me naked and smashed my phone, they could not erase what I now held. I took a deep breath. I walked over to the sink and turned on the cold water. I splashed my face, washing away the shock, washing away the sister who wanted to be loved, and waking up the woman who built a company from nothing. I dried my face with a paper towel. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window. I looked tired. Yes, my scrubs were wrinkled, but my eyes were clear. They were the eyes of a predator who had just realized the prey was limping. I grabbed a pitcher of water and a bucket of ice from the freezer. I needed a prop. I needed to walk back into that room and play the role they had assigned me, the dumb, poor, compliant sister. I pushed through the swing door. The dining room was loud with laughter. Madeline was touching Bryce's arm, giggling at something he had just said. Bryce was back in his seat, his face flushed, his smile wide and fake. He looked like a man without a care in the world, not someone who had just begged a loan shark for 2 more days. Ah, she returns. Elliot Hart boomed, raising his glass. We were just discussing the ribbon-cutting ceremony for the plaza. Bryce says he wants it to be a family affair. I set the water pitcher down on the table with a deliberate, heavy thud. The ice clinked against the glass. I sat down. I picked up my napkin and placed it on my lap. I looked at Milo, who was happily eating a roll, oblivious to the fact that his uncle had just sold his great-grandmother down the river. Family is so important, I said, my voice steady. Bryce looked at me, a flicker of annoyance in his eyes. He checked his watch. He was probably wondering when he could kick me out. Yes, exactly, Bryce said. That is why I want everyone there, to show the strength of the Caldwell name. I took a sip of water. I turned my body slightly so I was facing Bryce directly. This project, Bryce, I said, keeping my tone conversational, almost curious. The capital requirement must be massive. Elliot is putting up the construction costs. I assume Elliot nodded, looking impressed that I knew the terminology. Indeed, but the land acquisition for the secondary site is Bryce's contribution. Skin in the game, as they say. Secondary site, I asked, tilting my head. Bryce stiffened. He picked up his wine glass, but I noticed he didn't drink. He just held it near his mouth. A shield. It is just some leverage. Avery, Bryce said quickly, boring financial details. You would not be interested. I smiled. It was a thin, razor-sharp smile. I am interested. Actually, because I was looking at the county zoning maps recently, for work. We are looking for a new warehouse, and I noticed that residential properties in this specific zip code have skyrocketed in value. The table went quiet. Gloria stopped eating. She looked from me to Bryce, sensing a shift in the wind. What are you getting at? Gloria asked, her voice sharp. I am just wondering, I said, locking eyes with Bryce. When you say secondary site, and you talk about liquidity, are you talking about commercial real estate? Or are you talking about residential assets? Bryce choked. The wine he had finally taken a sip of went down the wrong pipe. He sputtered, coughing violently, red wine splashing onto the white tablecloth like a gunshot wound. Maddie pulled back in disgust. Bryce, good Lord. Gloria reached over and patted him hard on the back, her eyes fixed on me with a look of pure venom. Avery, stop interrogating your brother. He is choking. I sat back, crossing my arms. I am just making conversation. Mom, Bryce is the genius. Right, I am sure he can explain his financing structure. Unless, of course, the asset he is leveraging is not actually his to sell. The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Elliot Hart put his fork down. He was a shark, and sharks smell blood. He looked at Bryce, who was wiping his mouth with a napkin, his face pale and sweaty. What does she mean? Bryce Elliott asked. His voice was calm, but it was the calm before a lawsuit. Is there an encumbrance on the collateral? Bryce wheezed, waving his hand. No, absolutely not. Avery does not know what she is talking about. She changes bedpans for a living. Elliot, she thinks liquidity is something you find in a catheter bag. Maddie snickered, but it sounded forced. I did not flinch at the insult. I let it hang there, exposing him for the petty, frightened little man he was. I may be just a nurse, I said softly, but I know that you cannot build a skyscraper on a foundation that belongs to someone else, and I know that if you try, the whole thing comes crashing down. I looked at Grandma June. She was eating her peas, methodically, calmly, but under the table, her foot nudged mine, a solid, reassuring pressure. She had heard everything, too. She knew. Gloria slammed her hand on the table. Enough, Avery. If you cannot behave, you can leave. We are trying to have a celebration here. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who was slipping pills into her own mother's tea to steal a house. I am behaving. Mom, I said, I am just fascinated by Bryce's plan. It sounds complicated, almost like a house of cards. Bryce glared at me. His eyes filled with a mixture of hatred and genuine fear. He knew I knew something. He just did not know how much. He thought I was guessing. He thought I was just being a jealous sister picking at a scab. He had no idea I had the knife that would cut the limb off. I checked my phone under the table. The email had been delivered. The file was safe. So, Bryce said, his voice raspy, trying to regain the floor. As I was saying, the timeline is accelerated. We are looking to break ground in February. February, I repeated. That is soon. You must be very confident that all your domestic issues will be resolved by then. Bryce's jaw tightened. They will be, I bet, I said. I picked up my fork and took a bite of the roast beef. It was cold, but I chewed it slowly, savoring the taste. It tasted like victory. They thought they were the predators at this table. They thought they were the ones with the power, the money, the connections. But as I looked around at their anxious, greedy faces, I realized the truth. They were not predators. They were scavengers. And they had picked the wrong carcass to feed on. I finished my bite and took a sip of wine. This is delicious. Mom, I said, did you add something special to the recipe? Or is it just the taste of impending success? Gloria narrowed her eyes, trying to decipher my tone. Just eat, Avery. I will. I said, I'm going to finish everything on my plate. And I meant it. I was going to finish this dinner. And then, I was going to finish them. The recording in the cloud was just the first bullet in the chamber. I needed more. I needed to see the paperwork. I needed to see the pills. I needed to build a case so airtight that not even the best lawyer in North Carolina could get them out of it. I looked at Bryce again. He was avoiding my gaze, drinking his wine too fast. You know, Bryce, I said, you really should be careful with stress. It is bad for the heart. You look like you're about to have an event. I am fine. He snapped. Good, I said, because it would be a shame if you couldn't finish what you started. The rest of the meal passed in a blur of clinking silverware and forced conversation, but the dynamic had fundamentally shifted. Bryce was rattled. He kept checking his phone, likely waiting for a text from the loan shark. Gloria was on edge, sensing that her perfect tableau was cracking, and Elliot Hart was watching Bryce with a new, suspicious intensity. I had planted the seed of doubt. Now, I just needed to water it with evidence. As the plates were cleared, I glanced at the grandfather clock in the hallway. 8:30. The night was young. And the trial was just moving into the discovery phase. The dinner party eventually migrated from the dining room to the formal parlor, a transition marked by the scraping of chair legs and the clinking of crystal decanters. The Harts, led by the boisterous Elliot and the sneering Madeline, moved like a royal procession, with Bryce and my father trailing behind like eager courtiers. I stood up to follow, primarily to ensure Milo was settled in a corner with his iPad, but a hand clamped down on my forearm. It was Gloria. Her grip was tight, her nails digging into the fabric of my scrub top. Where do you think you are going? She asked, her voice a low hiss that did not carry beyond the threshold of the dining room. I am going to check on my son. I said, your son is fine. He is playing video games, which is all he seems to do. Gloria released my arm and gestured toward the table, which was a wasteland of dirty plates, half-eaten tenderloin, and wine-stained napkins. Since you are here, and since we had to scramble to accommodate your surprise arrival, the least you can do is help clear up. Consider it payment for the room and board. I looked at the table. There were catering staff in the kitchen. I had seen them earlier, but Gloria did not want the staff to clear the table. She wanted me to do it. She wanted to remind me of my place, to her. I was not a guest. I was barely a relative. I was the help. Fine, I said. I did not argue. I did not want to give her the satisfaction of seeing me upset. I began stacking the plates, the porcelain clattering softly in the quiet room. Gloria watched me for a moment, a satisfied smirk playing on her lips, before she turned and swept out of the room to join the real people in the parlor. I carried a stack of plates into the kitchen. The caterers were busy prepping the dessert trays, so I moved to the deep farmhouse sink in the butler's pantry. I turned on the faucet. The water was scalding hot. I plunged my hands into it, scrubbing away the remnants of a meal I had barely tasted. As the steam rose, clouding the window in front of me, my mind drifted back. This was not the first time I had stood at a sink while Bryce held court in the other room. I remembered being 18 years old. I had come home waving a letter from the admissions office of a prestigious university in Boston. It was a full academic scholarship. It was my ticket out, my validation, the proof that my hard work meant something. Gloria had not hugged me. She had read the letter, frowned, and placed it on the counter next to a pile of bills. We cannot afford the room and board. Avery, she had said, but the tuition is free. I had argued. I can work for the rest. We need to focus our resources on Bryce right now, she had replied. He is starting at the private college in Charleston in the fall. You know he needs a car. He needs the right clothes to pledge the right fraternity. Networking is expensive. Avery, you can go to the community college here. It is just as good. I had cried that night. I had cried until my eyes were swollen shut. They had taken my dream, stripped it for parts, and sold it to buy Bryce a brand new convertible so he could impress girls like Madeline Hart. Now, 16 years later, nothing had changed. I was still scrubbing their dishes. Bryce was still spending their money. I dried a crystal goblet with a linen towel, twisting the glass until it squeaked. You missed a spot. The voice startled me. I nearly dropped the glass. I turned around to see Grandma June standing in the doorway of the pantry. She had managed to slip away from the parlor unnoticed. The noise of the party. Bryce's loud laugh. The tinkle of piano music felt miles away. Grandma, I said, you should be sitting down. June ignored me. She walked into the small room, her cane tapping rhythmically on the tile floor. She did not look at the dishes. She looked at me. Her eyes were clear, sharp, and utterly devoid of the pity I expected. She looked at me the way a general looks at a soldier who has just returned from the front lines. They treat you like a servant because they are afraid of you, she said. I let out a short, bitter laugh. They are not afraid of me, Grandma. They think I am a joke. They think you are a joke because that is the only way they can sleep at night. She corrected. If they admitted you were competent, they would have to admit they are parasites. She reached into the pocket of her cardigan. Her hand, spotted with age and trembling slightly, withdrew a small object. It was a brass key. It was old, tarnished, with a complicated set of teeth that belonged to a lock made 50 years ago. She took my hand, the one still damp from the dishwater, and pressed the key into my palm. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was surprisingly strong. The study, she whispered. I looked at the key. Dad's study. It was my husband's study, she snapped. Richard just smokes in there. She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a murmur that was barely audible over the hum of the dishwasher. Behind the painting of the schooner, there is a wall safe. This key opens the inner lockbox. The combination for the outer door is your birthday. My birthday, I asked, surprised. June smiled, a small, sad expression that vanished as quickly as it appeared. I never forgot it. Avery, even if everyone else did. What do you want me to do? I asked. I want you to see what they have done, she said. I want you to see the paper trail. Bryce thinks he is clever. He thinks he can hide the rot behind a fresh coat of paint, but the numbers do not lie. She stepped back, adjusting her cardigan. Go now, she commanded. Gloria is playing the piano. Bryce is pouring brandy. They will not look for you for at least 20 minutes. I nodded. I dried my hands on my scrubs. I put the key in my pocket. It felt heavy, like a loaded weapon. I slipped out of the kitchen through the service door that led to the back hallway. The house was a sprawling maze, but I knew every creak of the floorboards. I moved silently, avoiding the patches of light cast by the sconces, hugging the shadows like a ghost. The study was at the far end of the east wing. It was a room that always smelled of stale tobacco and lemon polish. I reached the heavy oak door and turned the handle. It was unlocked. I slipped inside and closed the door softly behind me. The room was dark, illuminated only by the moonlight filtering through the heavy velvet drapes. I did not turn on the lamp. I did not want to risk a sliver of light betraying my presence under the door. I used the flashlight on my phone, keeping the beam low and focused. I moved to the fireplace. Above the mantel hung a massive oil painting of a schooner battling a stormy sea. It had been there since I was a child. I had always hated it. The water looked too dark, too dangerous. I reached up and gripped the heavy gold frame. It swung forward on hidden hinges. Behind it, embedded in the wall, was a steel safe. My heart hammered against my ribs. I could hear the faint sound of Gloria singing a Christmas carol in the parlor, her voice shrill and operatic. Silent night. The irony was thick enough to choke on. I punched in the numbers. 0, 4, 1, 2, April 12th. The light on the keypad turned green. The handle turned with a heavy clunk. I pulled the door open. Inside, there were stacks of cash, petty cash, mostly, and a few velvet jewelry boxes. But in the back, there was a metal lockbox. I took out the brass key June had given me. It fit the lock perfectly. I turned it, and the lid popped open. Inside, there was no jewelry. There were only papers. I pulled out the top stack. It was a loan document. I sat down in my father's leather swivel chair and shined my phone light on the pages. I began to read, and as I read, the rage that had been simmering in my gut turned into something cold and terrified. It was a second mortgage on the estate, dated 6 months ago. The amount was staggering, $2,500,000. I flipped to the signature page. There, on the line for the borrower, was the name June Caldwell, but the signature was wrong. Grandma June had a distinct handwriting, spiky, elegant, old-fashioned cursive. This signature was smooth. It was practiced. It looked like someone had traced her name, but without the tremor that had been in her hands for the last 5 years. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo of the document, making sure the date, the amount, and the signature were clearly visible. I dug deeper into the box. There were bank statements, not from June's personal account, but from a joint account I did not know existed. I scanned the transaction history. October 4th, transfer to C Squared Consulting, $15,000. October 10th, transfer to C Squared Consulting, $20,000. November 1st, Saks, Fifth Avenue, $6,000. November 3rd, The Venetian Resort, Las Vegas, $12,000. I felt sick. C Squared Consulting, that had to be a shell company, Bryce's company, and the rest, luxury shopping, casino trips. I found a credit card statement in Gloria's name, but the payment source was listed as the June Caldwell Revocable Trust. I ran my finger down the list of purchases. Dr. Simon Plastic Surgery, $5,000. Botox and fillers. Carolina Jaguar Land Rover. Lease payment, $1,200. They were stripping her clean. They were not just waiting for her to die to inherit the money. They were actively draining her accounts while she was still alive. They had taken out a mortgage on a house she owned outright, forging her signature to bypass the bank's verification protocols. This explained everything. It explained why Bryce was so desperate for the deal with Elliot Hart. It explained why he was terrified of the loan sharks. He had burned through $2.5 million in 6 months. I took photos of everything, every page, every incriminating line item. I photographed the credit card statements that showed my mother buying designer gowns while refusing to fix the heating in Grandma's wing of the house. I photographed the withdrawals made at ATMs inside casinos. My hands were steady now. The shock had passed. I was in professional mode. I was a forensic accountant of the soul, documenting the bankruptcy of their morality. I found one last document at the bottom of the box. It was a draft of a medical power of attorney. It was dated for tomorrow, December 25th. It granted Bryce Caldwell full control over June's medical and financial decisions, citing advanced dementia and incapacity to self-govern. And there, at the bottom, was a blank line for a witness, a testing medical professional. That was the line they wanted me to sign. They wanted me to be the final piece of their puzzle. They wanted me to sign away my grandmother's freedom so they could cover their tracks. If I signed this, the forgery on the mortgage would never be discovered. Bryce would have legal authority to ratify the loan retroactively. He would sell the house, pay off the debt, and dump Grandma in a state facility to rot. I stared at the blank line. They thought I was stupid. They thought I was weak. They thought that because I wore scrubs and drove a beat-up car, I would be grateful for a seat at their table, compliant enough to sign whatever paper they shoved in front of me. I put the papers back in the box, arranging them exactly as I had found them. I locked the box. I put it back in the safe. I closed the heavy steel door and spun the dial. I swung the painting of the schooner back into place. I stood up. I checked my phone. I had 47 high-resolution images. I selected them all and hit upload. I watched the blue bar race across the screen. Sent. I stood in the darkness for a moment longer, breathing in the smell of old tobacco and betrayal. This was no longer a family dispute. This was a crime scene. Grandma June had given me the key, but she had given me something much more dangerous than access to a safe. She had given me the weapon to end them. I walked to the door. I could still hear the music from the parlor. They were laughing now, probably toasting to the future, to the legacy. I opened the door and stepped out into the hallway. I was not going to run. I was not going to call the police immediately and have it swept under the rug with high-priced lawyers and quiet settlements. No, that would be too easy. That would let them spin the narrative. I needed a stage. Tomorrow night was the gala. The big reveal of Bryce's project. Half the town would be there. The investors. The press. The people whose opinions Gloria valued more than her own soul. That was where it had to happen. I walked back toward the kitchen, my footsteps silent on the runner. I needed to finish washing the dishes. I needed to be the good, obedient daughter for just 24 more hours. I would scrub their plates. I would listen to their insults. I would let them think they had won. Because when the curtain rose tomorrow night, I was going to make sure the spotlight burned them alive. I had just slid the heavy oil painting of the schooner back into place, the frame settling against the wall with a soft thud. When the doorknob turned, my heart hammered against my ribs, a sudden, violent rhythm. I stepped away from the fireplace, my hands instinctively smoothing the front of my scrubs, trying to look like I was merely admiring the room and not conducting a forensic audit of my family's crimes. The door swung open. It was Bryce. He did not look surprised to see me. He looked predatory. The hallway light cast his shadow long across the Persian rug, stretching out to touch the tips of my sneakers. He stepped inside, and with a deliberate, slow motion that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up, he closed the door behind him. The click of the latch was the loudest sound in the world. Well, Bryce said. His voice was thick, slightly slurred from the brandy, but there was a sharpness underneath it. The desperate man I had heard on the patio was gone, replaced by the bully who used to lock me in the basement when we were kids. "What are you doing in Dad's office?" "Avery," he asked, taking a step toward me. I held my ground. Though every instinct screamed at me to run, I was looking for the bathroom. I lied. I got turned around. "This house is big." Bryce laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You grew up in this house, Avery. You know exactly where the bathroom is. You are snooping." He took another step. He was a large man, over 6 feet tall, and he used his size like a weapon. He loomed over me, backing me up until my calves hit the leather sofa. The smell of expensive cologne and stale fear rolled off him in waves. "Did you find anything interesting?" he asked, his eyes darting to the safe behind the painting. He knew. He suspected I knew something, but he was not sure how much. "I do not know what you are talking about," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm just leaving." I moved to step around him, but he shot his arm out, blocking my path. His hand slammed against the bookshelf next to my head, boxing me in. "You are not going anywhere," he hissed. "Not until we come to an understanding." I looked up at him. "Let me out. Bryce, you think you are so high and mighty." "Do you not?" he sneered, leaning in close enough that I could feel his breath on my face. "Miss Perfect Nurse, Miss Saver of Lives, you come in here with your cheap clothes and your judgmental eyes, thinking you are better than us because you work for a living." I did not answer. I slipped my hand into my scrub pocket. I felt the cool glass of my phone. I pressed the volume up button, twice a shortcut I had programmed years ago to trigger the voice recorder instantly. A tiny vibration against my thigh told me it was running. "You are a problem, Avery," Bryce continued. "You have always been a problem, but I know how to fix problems." "Is that right?" I asked. He smiled. "And it was ugly. You know, nursing boards take allegations of substance abuse very seriously." I frowned. "What it would be a tragedy," Bryce said, his voice dropping to a mock whisper, "if someone reported that Avery Flores was seen pocketing oxycodone from the emergency room dispensary, or if someone filed a concern about her mental stability, single mother, financial stress, estranged from family, it fits the profile perfectly. They would suspend your license pending an investigation. That takes months, maybe years." My blood ran cold. He was threatening my livelihood. He was threatening the only thing that kept a roof over Milo's head. "You would not," I said. "Oh, I would," he countered. "I have friends on the hospital board. Avery, golfing buddies, one phone call, and you are back to flipping burgers." He paused, letting the threat sink in. Then he delivered the second blow, the one he knew would cripple me. "And then there is the boy," he said. I stiffened. "Do not talk about Milo." "Milo," he repeated, savoring the name. "Cute kid. Shame he has to live in such unstable conditions. If his mother lost her job and her income, Child Protective Services might determine that he is better off with his next of kin. wealthy, stable relatives who can provide a proper home. He poked me in the chest with a finger. We could take him, Avery, Mom and I. We could petition for custody, and with your record tarnished, no judge in North Carolina would say no. I felt a wave of nausea. It was a bluff. I knew it was a bluff, because Gloria did not want a child around ruining her aesthetic, but the mere mention of losing Milo made my vision blur. I let my shoulders slump. I let the tears that had been threatening to fall well up in my eyes. I needed him to think he had won. I needed him to think I was broken. "Okay," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Okay. Bryce, please, stop," he smirked, stepping back slightly, satisfied with the devastation he had caused. "I do not want any trouble," I sobbed, burying my face in my hands. "I just want to take Milo home." "Please do not call the board. Please do not take my son," Bryce chuckled, adjusting his cufflinks. "See? That was not so hard. We are family. Avery, we should not be fighting. I just need you to be a team player." "What do you want me to do?" I asked, looking up at him through my lashes, playing the part of the defeated sister perfectly. "I just need a signature," Bryce said. His guard was completely down now. He thought he was talking to a beaten dog. "What signature?" I asked. Bryce sighed, as if explaining something simple to a child. "Grandma is not well. You saw her tonight. She is confused. She is aggressive. It is not safe for her to be here alone. She is not alone. She lives with you." I said, "We cannot provide the care she needs." Bryce said quickly, "She needs a facility. I have arranged a place for her, a specialized memory care unit in Durham." He leaned in again. "But I need a medical professional to sign off on the competency evaluation. The doctors take too long, and they ask too many questions. Since you are a nurse and a family member, your signature on the affidavit carries weight. It speeds up the process." I wiped my nose. "You want me to say she is incompetent?" "She is incompetent," Bryce insisted. "And once you sign that paper, I get power of attorney. We move her next week, Tuesday morning. The ambulance is already booked. And the house," I asked softly. "The house is an asset," Bryce said, waving his hand dismissively. "We sell it to pay for her care, and of course, to invest in the future of this family. It is what Grandma would want if she were in her right mind." I stared at him. He had just confessed to everything. The conspiracy to commit fraud, the premeditated institutionalization of a sane woman, the theft of the estate. It was all there, recorded on the device in my pocket. "Okay," I said. "I will do it." Bryce grinned. He reached out and patted my cheek. His hand was clammy. "Good girl. I knew you would see reason. We will do it tomorrow night, at the party. I will have the notary there. You sign. We celebrate. And I forget all about making those phone calls to the nursing board." "Deal, deal," I whispered. He stepped aside. I walked past him, keeping my head down, keeping my posture slumped until I was out of the room. As soon as the door clicked shut behind me, I straightened up. I walked down the hallway, my steps silent on the carpet. My heart was pounding, but my hands were steady. I went straight to the guest bathroom on the first floor and locked the door. I pulled out my phone. I stopped the recording. File saved. I immediately opened my encrypted email app. I attached the audio file. I typed in the address of Noah Sterling, the shark of an attorney who had helped me incorporate my business 3 years ago. He was expensive, aggressive, and he hated bullies. Subject emergency, evidence of fraud and extortion. Body Noah. Listen to this immediately. They are moving to institutionalize her on Tuesday. He threatened my license and my custody of Milo. I have the documents regarding the forged mortgage. I need a restraining order and a filing for emergency guardianship ready to go. I hit send. Then I composed a second email to Vance, the private investigator I had hired when I first suspected Gloria was misusing the trust funds. Subject: the smoking gun, body. Bryce just confessed to the plan. He is selling the house to pay gambling debts. Get the background check on the facility in Durham. I bet he is getting a kickback or it is a state-run dump. I need the file by noon tomorrow. Sent. I stared at myself in the mirror. The woman looking back at me was not the scared girl Bryce thought he had just crushed. She was a fortress. They wanted a signature, I would give them a signature, but I was not going to do it in a quiet corner with a paid-off notary. Bryce wanted to use the party to show off. He wanted to use the Caldwell family legacy as a marketing tool. Fine. I would give him exactly what he wanted. I would make sure the whole world saw the Caldwell family. I unlocked the bathroom door and walked back out. I found a quiet corner in the foyer and pulled up the family group chat. It had been silent for months. Mostly just Gloria posting photos of her garden that nobody responded to. I typed a message. I made sure the wording was perfect. I needed them to feel secure. I needed them to think the sheep had been herded into the pen. Avery. I'm sorry for the scene earlier. Bryce and I talked. I understand now that Grandma needs help that we can't give her. I'll sign the papers tomorrow at the gala. I think we should do it right before the toast, so everyone can see that we are a united family and that we all just want what's best for her. I hit send. Almost immediately. 3 dots appeared. Gloria. Thank goodness. I knew you would do the right thing. Avery, make sure you wear something appropriate tomorrow. No scrubs. Bryce. Glad to hear it. Sis, see you tomorrow. I stared at the screen, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. They took the bait. They were so blinded by their own arrogance, so convinced of their own power, that they did not see the trap. They thought I was offering them a public display of submission. They did not realize I was inviting an audience to their execution. I pocketed the phone and went to find Milo. It was time to leave. We had a long night ahead of us, and I had a war to plan. The morning of December 25th did not dawn with the magic of Christmas. It dawned with the cold, gray light of reckoning. I woke up at 6 o'clock in the morning in my small rental apartment, but for the first time in years, I did not look at the peeling paint on the ceiling and feel trapped. I felt like a general surveying a battlefield before the first cannon fire. My family looked at me and saw Avery the failure. They saw the single mother in wrinkled scrubs, driving a car that sounded like a lawnmower, counting pennies for gas. They saw what they wanted to see because it made them feel superior. It made their greed feel justified. They had no idea who I really was. I got out of bed and walked to the closet. I pushed aside the rows of scrubs and the few clearance rack dresses I wore to family functions. I reached into the back, unzipping a garment bag that had not been touched in months. Inside hung a tailored black suit from Italy and a silk blouse. I was not just a nurse. Yes, I worked shifts in the emergency room because I loved the work, because saving lives grounded me, and because it kept me connected to the reality of human suffering. But 5 years ago, I had noticed a gap in the supply chain for specialized orthopedic equipment. I had taken my savings, taken a massive loan that terrified me at the time, and founded a legitimate company called Apex Medical Solutions. For the first 2 years, I ate ramen and worked 80 hours a week, but for the last 3 years, Apex had been the primary distributor for 3 major hospital networks in the Southeast. I did not just have a savings account, I had a portfolio. I owned the warehouse my company operated out of. I owned 2 rental properties in Raleigh that I managed through a holding company, so my name never appeared on public listings. I was not destitute, I was wealthy. I just chose not to live like it because I wanted Milo to grow up valuing character over commerce, and because I knew that if Gloria or Bryce ever found out, they would bleed me dry. But today, my resources were no longer a secret nest egg. They were ammunition. I made a phone call at 7 o'clock sharp. Noah, I said when the line connected. Merry Christmas. Avery. Noah Sterling's voice came through, clear and alert. He was the kind of lawyer who did not sleep. A shark in a 3-piece suit who charged $600 an hour and was worth every cent. I got your email. I listened to the recording, and I have already canceled my flight to Aspen, he said. This is not just a case, Avery. This is a demolition. I have 3 paralegals coming in within the hour. We are drafting the emergency motions now. I need you to meet me at the bank at 9, I said, and bring the forensic team's report. Done. I hung up. I showered, dressed in my normal poor Avery clothes, jeans and a sweater, and kissed a sleepy Milo on the forehead. I told him I had to run errands for Grandma June and that Mrs. Higgins next door would watch him for a few hours. I drove to the bank, but not the branch near my house. I drove to the main headquarters of the regional bank that held the Caldwell Family Trust. Noah was waiting for me in the lobby. He was a sharp-featured man with eyes that missed nothing. Standing next to him was a short, stout woman holding a tablet, Sarah, the lead forensic accountant I had retained on retainer through Apex. We went into a private conference room. Sarah did not waste time with pleasantries. "We found the money," she said. Sliding the tablet toward me, I looked at the screen. It was a spider web of transactions. Red lines connecting accounts that should never have touched. The company Bryce was sending money to. C² Consulting. "It is a shell," Sarah explained. "Registered in Florida 3 months ago. The registered agent is a woman named Linda Macy. I know her." I said, my voice cold. "That is my mother's cousin, the one who did time for check fraud in the 90s. "Exactly." Sarah said, "Money goes from your grandmother's trust into C². Then, within 48 hours, 80% of it is withdrawn as cash or transferred to a marker account at the Sapphire Palace Casino in Cherokee." She tapped a specific line item. "Look at the dates. Avery, November 12th, a $20,000 transfer to C². November 13th. Bryce Caldwell posts a photo on Instagram from the high-limit poker room at the Sapphire Palace." We cross-referenced the geolocation data from the metadata in his photo with the transaction timestamp. He was literally spending the money while the transfer was clearing. I felt a surge of disgust. It was so sloppy. They were not even good criminals. They were just arrogant ones. "And the mortgage?" I asked. Noah leaned forward. "That is the smoking gun. We had a handwriting expert analyze the signature on the loan documents against the samples you provided from June's old checks. It is a forgery. A bad one. The slant is wrong, and the pressure points indicate it was signed by someone right-handed trying to mimic a left-handed stroke. June is left-handed, Bryce is right-handed." I looked at Noah. "Is it enough?" "It is enough to send him to prison for 15 years, Noah said grimly. "Bank fraud, wire fraud, elder abuse, identity theft." I stood up. I walked to the window of the conference room. I could see the city waking up below. Families opening presents, unaware of the war being waged in this glass tower. "I do not just want him arrested," I said. "I want him exposed." Noah nodded. "We have contacted the bank's fraud department. They are livid. They have agreed to a silent freeze. They are allowing the accounts to remain ostensibly open so as not to tip Bryce off. But any attempt to move more than $100 will trigger an immediate flag. And they have a federal investigator on standby. But we need one more thing," I said. "We need June." I drove to the estate at 10 o'clock. I knew the schedule. Gloria would be at the salon getting her hair done for the gala. Bryce would be at the site of his project, likely trying to bribe a contractor to keep quiet about the lack of funds. The house was quiet. I let myself in with the key I still had from when I lived there, a key Gloria thought I had lost years ago. I went straight to the sunroom. Grandma June was there, sitting in her wheelchair, looking out at the frozen garden. She looked small, wrapped in a blanket, but when she turned to look at me, her eyes were blazing. "Did you find it?" she asked. I knelt beside her. "I found everything. Grandma, the loan, the shell company, the plan to put you away on Tuesday." She let out a long sigh, a sound that carried the weight of a broken heart. "I knew," she whispered. "I knew money was missing, but I did not think they would sell the house. Your grandfather built this place with his own hands. They are not going to sell it. I promised." I pulled a folder from my bag. Noah had drafted these documents within the hour. "This is a revocation of the power of attorney they think they have," I explained, "and this is a modification to the trust." June looked at the papers. She put on her reading glasses. Her hand shook, but she read every word. "The poison pill," she murmured, reading the clause Noah had inserted. "Yes," I said. "It states that in the event of any attempt to challenge your competency or place you in a facility against your will, the trust immediately dissolves, and full ownership of all assets, the house, the accounts, the land transfers irrevocably to a designated beneficiary." She looked at me over the rim of her glasses. "To you, to me," I said. Not to keep, but to hold, to protect. If I own the house, Bryce cannot sell it. If I own the accounts, Gloria cannot buy another facelift with your retirement. June took the pen. She did not hesitate. She signed her name, her true, spiky, left-handed signature, bold and defiant on the white paper. She handed the folder back to me. "He is going to try to make a speech tonight," she said. "He wants to announce the project. He wants to bring me up on stage and make me look like a senile old woman who is passing the torch." I stood up, clutching the folder. "Let him," I said. "Let him build his stage. I'm just going to change the script." I left the house before Gloria returned. I had one more stop to make. I drove to a nondescript office building near the airport. This was the headquarters of Titan Security, a private firm I used for my warehouse logistics. The owner, a former Navy SEAL named Marcus, owed me a favor. "I need 12 men." I told him. "Tonight," Marcus asked, raising an eyebrow. "It is Christmas." "Avery, that is double time. I will pay triple." I said, "I want them in black suits, earpieces. They need to look like high-end event security." But they answer only to me. "What is the job?" "Crowd control," I said, "and asset extraction. There is going to be a moment when a man on stage realizes his life is over. He might get violent. I want him neutralized without scratching the paint on the walls." Marcus nodded. "We will be there at 6. I spent the afternoon in a strange state of calm. I went back to my apartment. I ironed my poor dress, a simple gray shift that Gloria had once told me made me look like a governess. I wanted to look invisible. I wanted to blend into the background until the moment I struck. At 4 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was a message in the family group chat. "Gloria, make sure you are on time. Avery, the hearts are arriving at 7. And please, do something with your hair. We have a stylist coming for Maddie. I suppose I could pay for her to fix you up too, if you have 20 minutes. I stared at the screen. The arrogance was breathtaking. She was offering to pay for my hair with stolen money. She was micromanaging my appearance for an event where she planned to celebrate my brother's crimes. I typed back a single sentence. "Avery, don't worry, Mom, I'll be presentable." I put the phone down. I looked at the pile of documents on my kitchen table, the bank fraud report, the forensic accounting breakdown, the signed trust modification, the audio recordings on the USB drive. It was a mountain of evidence. It was a guillotine blade, sharpened and hoisted, waiting for gravity to do its work. At 5 o'clock, I dressed Milo in his best outfit, a little suit I had bought him for Easter. "You look handsome," I told him, adjusting his tie. "Are we going to the party?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "Is Uncle Bryce going to be mean again?" I pulled him close. "No, baby. Uncle Bryce is not going to be mean ever again. Uncle Bryce is going to be very surprised." I drove us back to the estate. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the lawn. The house was lit up like a palace. Valets were already setting up the podium for the car keys. A red carpet had been rolled out up the front steps. It was a beautiful setup. Bryce had spared no expense my grandmother's expense to create the illusion of success. I pulled my sedan up to the gate. The security guard, one of Marcus's men who had arrived early, nodded at me imperceptibly as he waved me through. I parked in the side lot, away from the impending arrival of the luxury cars. I took Milo's hand. We walked toward the house. The air was crisp and cold. Inside, the orchestra was tuning their instruments. The champagne was on ice. The trap was set. Bryce was inside, probably practicing his speech in the mirror, adjusting his tie, thinking he was the king of the world. He was waiting for his moment. He had no idea that I had already stolen the crown. The driveway of the Caldwell estate looked less like a private residence and more like a showroom for a luxury car dealership. By 7 o'clock, the line of vehicles stretched all the way down to the main road. I watched from the side entrance as a procession of Bentleys, Mercedes-Benzes, and even a vintage Rolls-Royce deposited the elite of Charlotte onto the red carpet my brother had rented for the occasion. There were city council members shaking hands with real estate tycoons. There were local news anchors adjusting their ties in the reflection of tinted windows. There was the pastor of the megachurch my mother attended only on Easter and Christmas, laughing loudly at a joke made by a man I recognized as a zoning commissioner. It was a grotesque display of wealth and influence, all built on a foundation of sand. I waited until the crush at the door had thinned slightly. I checked my reflection in the dark window of my sedan. I was not wearing the gray shift dress I had ironed earlier. That dress belonged to Avery the victim. That dress belonged to the woman they could ignore. Instead, I was wearing the black silk gown I had bought in Milan 2 years ago during a business trip for Apex Medical. It was floor-length, severe, and cut with a precision that screamed power. It had long sleeves and a high neck, but the back plunged low. It was elegant armor. I had pulled my hair back into a sleek, low chignon, and for the first time in years, I wore the diamond studs I had bought for myself when my company hit its first million in revenue. I took Milo's hand. He looked sharp in his little suit, his eyes wide as he took in the spectacle. "Stay close to me," I whispered, "and remember, if you see the men in the black earpieces, they are our friends." We walked toward the main entrance. The valet looked at me, confused. He did not recognize me. He saw the dress, the posture, the way I walked with my chin held high, and he assumed I was a VIP he had forgotten to put on the list. "Good evening, ma'am," he said, opening the door for us. I walked into the foyer. The transformation of the house was complete. The warm, cozy Christmas vibe of yesterday had been replaced by a cold, metallic glamour. The lighting was blue and silver. Waiters circulated with trays of caviar and champagne. A string quartet played in the corner, but the music was drowned out by the roar of conversation. As I stepped onto the marble floor, heads turned. It was a ripple effect. People stopped talking to look. They were trying to place me. Was I an investor? A celebrity from out of town? A new wife of some executive? Then, I saw the realization hit them. One by one. The whispers started. "Is that the daughter?" The nurse. "No, it cannot be." I walked through the crowd like Moses parting the Red Sea. I did not smile. I did not stop to make small talk. I moved with a singular purpose toward the ballroom where the stage had been erected. "Well, look who decided to play dress-up." The voice was sharp and shrill. I stopped and turned. Madeline Hart stood near the ice sculpture, holding a flute of champagne. She looked immaculate in a gold sequined dress, but her face was twisted in a sneer. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on the silk of my gown, trying to find a loose thread, a stain, anything to confirm her superiority. "You actually look decent." "Avery," she said, her voice loud enough for the circle of socialites around her to hear. "I did not know Rent the Runway delivered on Christmas Day. Did you get the friends and family discount?" The women around her tittered nervously. I looked at her. I looked at the diamond necklace around her neck. A necklace I knew Bryce had bought her 3 weeks ago using a withdrawal from Grandma June's emergency medical fund. "It is not a rental." "Maddie," I said. My voice was calm, projecting easily over the music. "Oh," she laughed. A brittle sound. "Did you thrift it then? It is amazing what you can find in the bargain bin if you dig hard enough." I took a step closer to her. The air between us crackled. "This dress cost $3,000, I said softly, but with enough ice to freeze the champagne in her glass. "And the difference between my dress and your necklace, Maddie, is that I paid for mine with money I actually earned." Maddie's smile faltered. She touched her throat instinctively. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means that rented dignity is worse than a rented dress," I said. "Enjoy the champagne. It might be the last glass you can afford for a while." I turned and walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing there with her mouth open, the laughter of her friends dying in their throats. I had not gone 10 feet before a hand grabbed my elbow. It was Gloria. She hissed in my ear, her grip painful. "What are you doing? Why are you wearing that? You look like you are trying to upstage the bride." I pulled my arm free. "I am just dressing for the occasion." "Mother." "It is a gala, is it not?" Gloria glared at me, her eyes darting around to see if anyone was watching us. She was wearing a massive sapphire brooch that I recognized from Grandma June's jewelry box, one of the items I had seen missing from the safe. "Just remember the plan," she whispered harshly. Bryce is going to call you up after the intro. You go up there, you look sad, you sign the paper, and then you get off the stage. Do not try to make a speech. Do not try to be clever. Just do your job. I looked down at her. She looked small. For all her posturing, for all her cruelty, she was just a frightened woman clinging to a lifestyle she had never earned. I will do my job. Mom, I said, I promise you, I will do exactly what needs to be done. Gloria seemed to relax slightly. Good. Now go stand over there, out of the way. She pushed me toward the edge of the room, near the AV booth. I went willingly. It was exactly where I needed to be. I nodded to the technician behind the soundboard. He was a young guy, wearing a headset. I had slipped him $200 an hour ago when I arrived at the side gate to let me test the connection on the HDMI cable labeled Auxiliary Input. He thought I was just preparing a surprise anniversary video. Is it ready? I asked him quietly. He gave me a thumbs up. Just plug in when you are ready, ma'am. It will override the main feed. I stood in the shadows, clutching my sleek leather clutch. Inside was not lipstick or a compact. Inside was an iPad Pro, loaded with the files I had extracted from the safe and the cloud. The lights in the ballroom dimmed. A hush fell over the crowd. A spotlight hit the center of the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, the announcer's voice boomed. Please welcome the visionary behind the future of Charlotte, Mr. Bryce Caldwell. Applause erupted. It was polite, measured applause, but it was loud enough to feed Bryce's ego. My brother walked onto the stage. He looked the part. His tuxedo was tailored, his hair was perfect, and his smile was blinding. But from where I stood, I could see the sheen of sweat on his forehead. I could see the way his hands shook slightly as he adjusted the microphone. Thank you, Bryce shouted, waving to the crowd. Thank you all for coming on this special night. He launched into his speech. It was a masterclass in buzzwords. He talked about synergy and revitalization. He pointed to the massive screen behind him, which displayed a digital rendering of Legacy Plaza. It was a shiny glass and steel monstrosity that replaced the beautiful historic woods that bordered our estate. This is not just a building, Bryce said, his voice dropping to a register he thought sounded sincere. This is a promise to our community, a promise to our family. He paused for effect. He looked out at the audience, finding Elliot Hart in the front row. Elliot nodded, looking satisfied. But, Bryce continued, his face falling into a mask of practiced sorrow, progress sometimes comes with difficult transitions. As many of you know, the Caldwell estate has been in our family for generations. It has been held in trust by our matriarch, my grandmother, June Caldwell. A murmur of sympathy rippled through the room. We all love June, Bryce said. She is the heart of this family, but time is a cruel thief. In recent months, her health has declined rapidly. Her mind is no longer with us. It has been heartbreaking to watch the woman who raised us lose her battle with dementia. I felt a cold rage burning in my chest. He was burying her alive. He was standing there, in front of 300 people, declaring her dead while she sat in the back room, fully conscious, waiting for my signal. Bryce wiped a non-existent tear from his eye. Because of her condition, she can no longer manage the complexities of the estate. And for her own safety, and to ensure the success of this project which she dreamed of, we have had to make hard decisions. He took a deep breath. Tonight, in front of all of you, our friends, our partners, our community, we want to formalize the transition of leadership. We want to show that the Caldwell legacy is safe. He beckoned to the side of the stage. I would like to invite my sister, Avery Flores, to the stage. Avery is a registered nurse. She has been caring for Grandma June, and she has agreed to attest to the medical necessity of this transition. The spotlight swung searching for me. I stepped out of the shadows. The light hit me, blindingly bright. I did not blink. I walked up the stairs to the stage. The click of my heels on the wood floor echoed in the silence. I saw the confusion on Bryce's face as I approached. He had expected the mousy sister in the gray dress. He was not expecting the woman in black silk who looked like she was coming to a funeral, his funeral. He tried to recover quickly. Ah, Here she is. Avery. He held out a pen and a clipboard. The document was clipped to it. The affidavit of incapacity. Just sign right here. Avery, he said, his voice tight, moving the microphone away so only I could hear, and then get lost. I took the clipboard. I took the pen. The room was silent. 300 pairs of eyes were watching. Gloria was in the front row, clutching her pearls, willing me to sign. Elliot Hart was leaning forward, eager to see his investment secured. I looked at the document. It was exactly what I had seen in the safe. A lie printed on legal bond paper. I looked at Bryce. He was smiling, but his eyes were screaming, "Sign it, you idiot." I stepped past him. I walked directly to the podium. I adjusted the microphone stand, raising it to meet my height. Avery Bryce whispered, panic flaring in his eyes. "What are you doing?" I leaned into the mic. My voice rang out, clear, steady, and amplified to every corner of the room. "My brother says that our grandmother, June Caldwell, is no longer mentally competent," I said. The crowd shifted. The atmosphere changed instantly from celebratory to confused. "He says she does not know where she is. He says she cannot make decisions. He says she is a danger to herself." I turned to look at Bryce. He was frozen, his hand half extended as if to grab the mic. But he knew he could not do it without causing a scene. "But I have a question for you." "Bryce," I said. I held up the clipboard, then let it drop to the floor. It landed with a loud, flat clap. "If Grandma June is so senile that she needs to be institutionalized, then how did she sign the deed transfer documents yesterday that you submitted to the bank?" The silence in the room was absolute. It was a vacuum. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpet. Bryce's face went the color of ash, what he croaked. His voice cracked over the speakers. "I do not know what you are talking about." I reached into my clutch. I pulled out my iPad. "I think you do." I said, "You see, Bryce, you told everyone here that you are building a legacy, but you forgot one thing." I turned to the AV technician and nodded. I plugged the cable into the side of my iPad. The massive screen behind us flickered. The beautiful rendering of Legacy Plaza vanished. In its place, a high-resolution photograph appeared. It was 10 feet tall. It was the loan document I had found in the safe, the one with the forged signature. "But you forgot to check who actually owns the house," I said. Bryce lunged for me. "Turn it off," he screamed, abandoning all pretense of civility. "Cut the feed." But it was too late. I swiped the screen. The next image appeared. It was the bank statement showing the transfer to the casino, and then the next, the text messages between Bryce and his bookie, and then I hit play on the audio file. Bryce's voice, unmistakable and terrified, boomed through the ballroom speakers, echoing off the crystal chandeliers. "The old woman is practically a vegetable. I will get her declared incompetent. I liquidate the estate. The land alone is worth enough to cover what I owe." The crowd gasped. It was a collective sound of horror. Elliot Hart stood up, his face purple with rage. Gloria covered her mouth with her hands, sinking into her chair. I stood center stage, the black dress absorbing the light, the truth playing out behind me like a movie. Bryce stood there, stripped naked in front of the people he wanted to impress the most. He looked at the screen, he looked at the crowd, and then he looked at me. And in that moment, he realized that Christmas was over. The trial had just delivered its verdict. The voice that echoed through the ballroom was magnified by a 10,000-watt sound system. It was not the polished, charming baritone Bryce had used to seduce investors just moments ago. It was the tinny, desperate, snarling voice of a man conspiring in the dark. "I will get her declared incompetent." The speakers boomed, the audio quality crisp enough to hear the wind rustling the leaves in the background of the recording. "I put June in that state facility in Durham, the one that takes Medicaid. Then I liquidate the estate." The crowd did not move. It was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The champagne glasses stopped halfway to mouths. The polite whispers about zoning laws and golf handicaps evaporated, replaced by a suffocating blanket of shock. This was not a family argument spilling over into public view. This was a confession. I stood at the podium, my hand resting lightly on the iPad. I did not look at the audience. I looked at Bryce. He was standing 5 feet away from me. His face had drained of all color, leaving him looking like a wax figure melting under the stage lights. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. He was watching his life disintegrate in real time. I swiped the screen again. The image behind me changed. The loan document vanished, replaced by a spreadsheet. It was a forensic accounting breakdown of the C-squared consulting accounts. "See those red lines?" I asked, my voice cutting through the silence. "Those are transfers. $200,000 moved from the June Caldwell Revocable Trust into a shell company registered to a convicted felon in Florida." I zoomed in on the screen. "And here is where the money went." I continued. The screen flashed again. A collage of receipts appeared. They were not for construction materials. They were not for architectural plans. The Sapphire Palace Casino, marker redemption, $50,000. The Sapphire Palace Casino, VIP suite, $4,000. DraftKings account funding, $25,000. The gasp from the crowd was audible this time. It started in the front row with the investors and rippled back to the servers standing by the kitchen doors. "This is not a development project," I said, looking directly at Elliot Hart. "This is a Ponzi scheme built to cover a gambling addiction and the collateral he put up. It is the home of an 82-year-old woman he plans to lock away in a state ward." That broke the spell. "You bitch," Bryce screamed. The sound was animalistic. The veneer of the businessman shattered completely, revealing the violent, cornered thug underneath. He did not think. He did not calculate. He just reacted. Bryce lunged at me. His hands were curled into claws. His teeth bared. He covered the distance between us in 2 strides. His intention clear. He was going to smash the iPad, and then he was going to smash me. The crowd screamed. Madeline shrieked, but I did not flinch. I did not step back. I did not even raise my hands to defend myself. I did not have to. From the shadows on stage left and stage right, 2 shapes materialized. They moved with a speed and precision that made Bryce look like he was moving in slow motion. A massive hand clamped onto Bryce's right wrist. Another arm locked around his throat. It was the Titan security team, Marcus's men. They were dressed in black suits that blended into the background, but their grip was made of iron. In one fluid motion, they spun Bryce around and slammed him face first onto the polished wood of the stage. It was not a brawl. It was a neutralization. One guard placed a knee in the center of Bryce's back, pinning him effectively, while the other secured his hands behind him with a zip tie that made a sharp, definitive zip sound. "Get off me," Bryce howled, thrashing against the floor. "Do you know who I am? I own this town. You own nothing," the guard said calmly, tightening his grip. "Stay down." The room was in chaos now. People were standing up, knocking over chairs. Phones were out, recording everything. The flash of cameras popped like strobes. Then, a wail rose up from the front row. "Stop it. Stop it right now." It was Gloria. She scrambled up the stairs to the stage, her blue gown bunching around her knees. She threw herself toward the guards, beating her fists ineffectually against their broad backs. "Let him go. That is my son. You are hurting him." She turned to me, her face a mask of mascara-stained fury. "Avery, tell them to stop. Have you lost your mind? This is a private family matter. You are ruining us. You are defaming this family in front of everyone." I looked at my mother. She was not horrified by the crime. She was horrified by the exposure. "Defaming," I repeated into the microphone. I swiped the iPad again. The screen behind us shifted. The gambling debts disappeared. In their place, a new set of invoices appeared. Dr. Simon Plastic Surgery. Facelift and neck lift. $18,000, paid by June Caldwell. Revocable trust, labeled as home maintenance. The image shifted again. Saks Fifth Avenue. Couture gown, emerald green. $6,000, paid by June Caldwell. Revocable trust, labeled as medical supplies. The room went deadly quiet again. Gloria froze. She looked up at the massive screen, seeing her own vanity itemized and projected for 300 people to see. "You want to talk about defamation. Mother, I asked, my voice cold and hard. You let your son drug your mother. You let him steal her house, and you did not stop him because he was buying you jewelry with the change. Gloria's mouth fell open. She looked out at the audience. She saw her friends from the garden club staring at her with open disgust. She saw the pastor shaking his head. I did not know, she stammered, backing away from me. I thought Bryce told me it was his money. I swiped the screen again. An email chain appeared. It was between Bryce and Gloria. Subject: Mom's meds. Gloria. I gave her the double dose like you said. She is completely out of it. Is the notary coming tomorrow? We need to get this done before she wakes up. The gasp from the room was different this time. It was not shock. It was revulsion. Gloria made a choking sound. She stumbled back, her heels catching on the carpet, and collapsed into a heap of blue silk next to her pinned son. She covered her face with her hands, not to hide her tears, but to hide from the judgment burning down on her. Avery, the voice came from the foot of the stairs. It was my father. Richard. He was standing there, looking gray and defeated. He held his hands up in a placating gesture. Avery, please, he said, his voice trembling. That is enough. Look at what you are doing. You have made your point. Let's go into the back room. Let's resolve this like a family. We can fix this. I looked down at him. For 34 years, I had waited for this man to speak up. I had waited for him to defend me when Gloria called me worthless. I had waited for him to stop Bryce when he bullied me. I had waited for him to be a father. It is too late for a family meeting. Dad, I said, but they are your blood, he pleaded. We can work something out. Bryce will pay the money back. We do not need to involve the police. Think about the scandal. I stepped to the edge of the stage. I looked him dead in the eye. Where was this voice when they locked me out on Christmas Eve, I asked. Where was this negotiation when Bryce threatened to take my son away from me? Richard flinched. I did not know he did that. You knew, I said. You always knew. You just found it easier to be deaf than to be decent. You watched them drug your wife's mother and you said nothing because you liked living in the big house. I gestured to the guards. You have been silent your whole life, Dad. Do not start talking now. It does not suit you. Richard slumped. He lowered his head and turned away, unable to meet my gaze. I turned my attention to the side of the stage. Madeline Hart was trying to inch her way toward the exit. She was clutching her purse, her head down, trying to disappear into the crowd, going somewhere. Maddie, I asked. She froze. She turned slowly, her face pale, her eyes wide with fear. I had nothing to do with this, she said, her voice shrill. I did not know anything about the loans. I am a victim here too. Bryce lied to me. I swiped the screen one last time. A credit card statement appeared. Tiffany Cumberby diamond pendant, $12,000, authorization signature, Madeline Hart, card, June Caldwell, trust. You signed the receipt. Maddie, I said. Maddie stared at the screen. Bryce gave me the card, she cried. He said it was his corporate account. And you did not wonder why his corporate account was named the June Caldwell Trust, I asked. Or were you just too busy spending to read the plastic? Maddie looked at her parents. Elliot Hart was standing with his arms crossed, looking at his daughter with a mixture of fury and disappointment. He did not move to help her. He turned his back on her. Maddie burst into tears. Real, ugly tears. Not because she was sorry, but because her social standing had just been incinerated. Suddenly, the heavy double doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. A hush fell over the room as a phalanx of people entered. Leading the pack was Noah Sterling. He walked with a stride that commanded respect, carrying a thick leather briefcase. Flanking him were 4 uniformed police officers and 2 men in suits who bore the unmistakable aura of federal agents. Noah walked straight to the stage. He did not look at the crowd. He looked at me and nodded. Ms. Flores, he said, his voice carrying easily to the front rows. We have the emergency injunction. He placed the briefcase on the edge of the stage and snapped it open. He pulled out a stack of documents. He turned to the police officers. Officers, This is the documentation regarding the fraudulent transfer of deed and the systemic elder abuse reported earlier today. We also have the statements from the bank's fraud division confirming the unauthorized wire transfers. He pointed at Bryce, who was still pinned to the floor. That is Bryce Caldwell. He is to be detained pending charges for wire fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. The officers moved up the stairs. The Titan guards stepped back, allowing the police to take over. They hauled Bryce to his feet. His tuxedo was dusty, his tie was crooked, and his face was a mask of sheer terror. "You cannot do this!" Bryce screamed as they slapped the handcuffs on him. The metal clicked shut, a sound much louder and more final than the lock of the front door had been 2 nights ago. "Call my lawyer, Mom. Call the lawyer." Gloria did not move. She was sobbing into the carpet, and one of the officers asked, pointing at Gloria. Noah looked at his file. "Gloria Caldwell is named as a co-conspirator in the medical abuse case. We have evidence of medication tampering. She needs to be taken in for questioning." 2 female officers approached Gloria. They gently but firmly pulled her up. She was limp, her legs refusing to hold her weight. "My party," she moaned, looking around at the ruined gala. "My beautiful party." They led them away. Bryce was dragged out, shouting obscenities. Gloria was escorted out, weeping about her social calendar. The federal agents moved toward Elliot Hart. They began speaking to him in low tones. I saw Elliot nod, looking pale, and point toward his daughter. Maddie was sitting on a chair, shaking, as an agent approached her to ask about the credit card fraud. The room was buzzing with a chaotic energy. The guests were stunned, horrified, and thrilled all at once. They had come for a ribbon cutting, and they had witnessed a purge. I stood alone at the podium. The screen behind me had gone black. I unplugged my iPad. My hands were trembling slightly now that the adrenaline was beginning to fade, but I steadied them against the wood. I looked out at the sea of faces. "I am sorry to end the evening this way," I said into the microphone. My voice was soft now, exhausted. "But there is one person here who actually owns this house, and I think she would like to say good night." I looked toward the back of the room. Near the sound booth, where I had been standing earlier, the crowd parted. Grandma June was there. She was sitting in her wheelchair. She had insisted on coming down. She was wearing her best Sunday dress and a string of pearls that Bryce had not managed to pawn. She wheeled herself forward. The room fell silent out of respect. She did not look frail. She looked like a queen reclaiming her throne. She rolled up to the base of the stage. I walked down the stairs and knelt beside her. She reached out and cupped my face. Her hand was warm. "You did good, Avery," she whispered. I handed her the microphone. June looked at the crowd. She looked at the empty champagne glasses, the shocked socialites, and the police lights flashing through the windows. She cleared her throat. "This house," she said, her voice raspy but amplified loud and clear, "was built on hard work, not on lies." She paused, letting her gaze sweep over the room. "If you are looking for the exit, it is the same door you came in. Please drive safely, and take your gossip with you." She handed the microphone back to me. There was a moment of hesitation, and then someone in the back started clapping. Then another person. Then the whole room. It wasn't polite applause. It was the awkward, frantic applause of people who wanted to prove they were on the winning side. I stood up. I looked at the security team. "Clear the room," I said, as the guests began to file out, muttering and checking their phones. I looked down at June. She looked at the empty stage where Bryce had been pinned moments ago. Then she looked at me and nodded once, a sharp, decisive dip of her chin. "It is done," she said. I looked around the ballroom. The decorations were still sparkling. The ice sculpture was melting. But the air felt different. The heaviness was gone. "No. Grandma," I said, taking her hand. "Not just done." I looked toward the door where the police had taken my brother and mother. "It is just beginning. The end is near for them. But for us, we are just getting our keys back." The ballroom was a cacophony of hushed whispers and the crackle of police radios, a stark contrast to the Mozart string quartets that had filled the air only an hour before. The illusion of the Caldwell family dynasty had not just cracked, it had shattered into a million jagged pieces, and I was standing in the center of the debris, holding the hammer. Noah Sterling stepped forward, his leather shoes clicking authoritatively against the hardwood stage. He did not look at the shocked guests. His focus was entirely on the legal dismantling of my brother and mother. He gestured to the federal agents who had just entered the wings of the stage. "Take him into custody," Noah commanded, his voice cutting through the ambient noise like a knife. Bryce, who had been hauled to his feet by the uniformed officers, began to struggle again. The arrogance that had defined his entire existence was evaporating, replaced by the raw, animalistic panic of a man realizing he was trapped. On what grounds? Bryce screamed, spit flying from his mouth as he thrashed against the cuffs. "You cannot arrest me. This is a civil matter. My lawyer will have your badges for this." "It is not a civil matter." "Bryce," Noah said, holding up a thick stack of stapled papers, "this is a federal indictment. We have the wire fraud charges for the interstate transfer of funds to a shell company. We have the bank fraud charges for the forged mortgage application. And perhaps most damning of all, we have the sworn affidavit from the bank's fraud division confirming that you impersonated June Caldwell to access her secured lines of credit." Bryce's knees seemed to give out. He slumped against the officer holding him, his face a mask of disbelief. "And," Noah added, looking over at the two officers standing near Gloria, "we have the elder abuse charges, the intentional overmedication of a dependent adult to facilitate financial exploitation. That is a felony in the state of North Carolina." Gloria let out a wail that sounded less like a human cry and more like a wounded siren. She was standing near the edge of the stage, her expensive blue gown now looking like a costume from a canceled play. "I did not know," she sobbed, looking frantically at the faces in the crowd, begging for an ally that did not exist. "I am a victim. He told me it was legal. He told me he was taking care of us." I walked down the steps of the stage and stood in front of her. The officers paused, allowing me this moment. "You knew, Mom," I said softly. "I did not," she insisted, reaching out as if to grab my hand, but pulling back when she saw the look in my eyes. "You knew the medication made her sick." I said, "You knew she was not eating because she was too sedated to swallow. You knew because I told you 3 months ago that she looked over-medicated, and you told me to mind my own business. You traded your mother's health for a facelift and a country club membership." Gloria's face crumbled. She looked at the floor, unable to deny it any longer. "I just wanted us to be happy," she whispered. "I just wanted us to have nice things. You had nice things," I said. "You had a home. You had a family. But that was not enough. You wanted the world, and you were willing to sell Grandma to get it." I nodded to the officers. "Please remove them," as they began to escort Bryce and Gloria toward the side exit, away from the prying eyes of the guests, but toward the waiting squad cars. Bryce turned his head back one last time. His eyes met mine, filled with a toxicity that had festered for 30 years. "You will regret this. Avery," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You are nothing. You are just a nurse. You will never be one of us." I watched him go, feeling a strange lightness in my chest. "You are right, Bryce," I said to the empty air where he had stood. "I am nothing like you, and that is the greatest victory of my life." The doors swung shut behind them, cutting off Bryce's shouting. The silence that followed was heavy, pregnant with the unspoken shock of 300 people who had just watched the fall of a house they thought was invincible. I turned back to the room. The guests were standing in clusters, looking at me with a mixture of fear and awe. They were waiting for a cue. They did not know if the party was over or if this was just part of the show. I walked back to the microphone one last time. "My brother wanted a signature tonight," I said, my voice steady. "He wanted me to sign a paper declaring that June Caldwell was weak, incompetent, and voiceless. He wanted me to be the final stamp of approval on his theft." I looked over at Grandma June, who was sitting tall in her wheelchair next to the stage, a small smile playing on her lips. "I did not sign that paper," I continued, "but I do have a document to read. I picked up the folder Noah had prepared. I opened it. This is a notice of trespass and immediate eviction, issued by the sole owner of this property, June Caldwell, and executed by her interim trustee, Avery Flores. A murmur rippled through the room, effective immediately. I announced, looking directly at the crowd. Anyone who does not have a direct invitation from the current owner is required to vacate the premises. The gala is canceled, the project is canceled, and the open bar is closed. There was a moment of hesitation, and then a flurry of movement. People began grabbing their coats and purses, eager to escape the awkwardness. The Harts Elliott, his wife, and the sobbing Madeline were the first to the door, flanked by federal agents who were asking them to remain for questioning in the parking lot regarding the credit card usage. As the room began to empty, my father, Richard, stepped out from the shadows near the curtain. He looked small. He looked like a man who had spent his life hiding behind his wife's ambition, and now that the shield was gone, he was naked. "Avery," he said, his voice trembling, "where am I supposed to go?" I looked at him. I felt a pang of pity, but I strangled it before it could take root. Pity was what had allowed him to enable them for decades. "I do not know, Dad," I said, "but this is my home," he pleaded. "I have lived here for 20 years. My clothes are upstairs. My books. You lived here as a guest." I corrected. "You lived here because Grandma June was kind enough to let you stay. And you repaid that kindness by watching television while your son plotted to sell the roof over her head." I gestured to the door. "The police will allow you to retrieve one bag of personal items." I said, "Essentials only. Anything bought with funds from the trust, which, looking at the records, is almost everything you own, will be seized and held as evidence until the forensic audit is complete." "One bag," he gasped. "Avery, be reasonable. I am your father, and she is your mother-in-law," I said, pointing to June, "and you were going to let them put her in a state ward on Tuesday." Richard looked at June. She did not look away. She stared at him with eyes that were tired but dry. "Goodbye, Richard," June said softly. He stood there for a moment longer, opening and closing his mouth like a fish on dry land. Then, realizing there was no mercy to be found in this room, he turned and shuffled toward the exit, a broken man walking into the cold night. Within 20 minutes, the ballroom was empty. The waiters had cleared the glasses. The Titan security team was ushering the last of the valet staff off the property. The house was quiet, for the first time in as long as I could remember. The Caldwell estate was truly silent. There was no jazz music, no shouting, no fake laughter, just the hum of the heating system and the settling of the old timber frame. I walked down the steps of the stage and went to Milo. He was sitting on a velvet bench near the wall, playing on his tablet, but he had been watching everything. He looked up at me as I approached. "Is the bad man gone?" he asked. "Yes, baby," I said, sitting down next to him and pulling him into a hug. "The bad man is gone, and he is not coming back." He looked at the empty room. "Grandma Gloria, too?" "Yes," I said. Milo thought about this for a second. "Are we going to leave now?" he asked. "To go eat burgers?" I laughed, a sound that felt like it was breaking loose from a cage in my chest. I hugged him tighter, burying my face in his neck, smelling the soap and the little boy scent of him. "No," I said, "we are not going anywhere. We are staying right here." I stood up and took his hand. Together. We walked over to Grandma June. She was staring at the large screen behind the stage, which was now dark. She looked tired, her age finally showing in the slump of her shoulders, but there was a peace in her expression that I had not seen in years. "It is over, Grandma," I said. She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was cool, her fingers fragile. They thought I was weak. "Avery," she whispered, her voice raspy in the quiet room. "They thought because my legs did not work well and my hands shook that my mind was gone too." She looked up at me, her eyes fierce. "I let them think it," she said. "I let them dig the hole." I sat in that chair, and I played the confused old woman because I knew if I fought them too early, They would just hide the money better. I had to wait until they were so confident, so arrogant, that they put it all on display. I squeezed her hand. You were brilliant. I was terrified, she admitted. Until you came home. She looked at Milo. Come here, child, she said. Milo stepped forward shyly. June reached into the pocket of her dress and pulled out the macaroni and glitter box he had tried to give her on the porch 2 nights ago. She had saved it. She must have retrieved it from the trash where Gloria had likely tossed it, or perhaps Gloria had never even thrown it away, just dismissed it. I opened it. June said, It is a beautiful ornament. Milo smiled, a real, wide smile. I made it for your tree. Well, June said, looking around the massive, empty ballroom, we have a very big tree in the foyer, and I think it needs some decoration that was not bought with stolen money. We walked together into the foyer. The massive Christmas tree towered above us, covered in expensive glass baubles and silver ribbons. It looked cold and impersonal. I lifted Milo up. He reached out and hung his macaroni ornament on a prominent branch, right at eye level. It hung there, a little lopsided, shedding a few flakes of gold glitter, stark against the perfection of the other decorations. It was the most beautiful thing in the house. I looked at the front door, the heavy oak door that had been locked in my face on Christmas Eve, the door that had symbolized my exclusion, my failure, my status as the outsider. I walked over to it. I turned the deadbolt. Click, I threw it open. The cold night air rushed in, cleansing the stale perfume of the party. I looked out at the driveway. It was empty. The luxury cars were gone. The red carpet was just a strip of fabric on the stone. I took a deep breath of the winter air. It smelled of pine and rain. I closed the door. I locked it. But this time, I was on the inside. I turned back to the room. Grandma June and Milo were waiting for me. The house felt vast. Yes, but it no longer felt hostile. It felt like a blank canvas. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from Noah. Noah Bryce is being processed. Bail denied due to flight risk. The assets are frozen. We start the recovery process on Monday. Get some sleep. Avery. You won. I put the phone away. I did not feel like a winner in a game. I felt like a survivor of a storm. I walked over to June and Milo. What do we do now? Milo asked. Looking at the two of us. June looked at me. She lifted her hand, and I took it. I took Milo's hand with my other. We formed a small chain. 3 generations standing in the center of the reclaimed kingdom. Now, June said, her voice strong and clear. We have Christmas. I looked at the ornament. I looked at the woman who had saved the house, and the boy who was the reason I had fought for it. The screen at the party had gone dark. The microphones were off. The audience was gone. But as I stood there in the quiet, holding the hands of the only people who mattered, I realized that the loudest statement had not been made with a speech or a video. It had been made by the silence that followed the truth. Gloria and Bryce had spent their lives talking, bragging, lying, manipulating. They had filled every room with their noise to drown out their emptiness. But tonight, the house was finally speechless, and in that silence, we found our home. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Avery's journey of reclaiming her dignity and her family's legacy resonated with you. I would love to know where you are tuning in from right now. Please drop a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on how Avery handled her family. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who need a reminder that sometimes silence is the loudest revenge.